Welcome to Will I Run for President by Willis. I am your host, Willis, and we are going to start breaking down what's going on in Congress. So stick in, buckle up, and enjoy the ride. So today we're going to kind of go in order of how everything came down the pipeline to start. So we are going to start with Senate resolutions. Now, basically, nothing really happened here. They elected the president pro tempore. They elected Secretary of the Senate and Sergeant at Arms and Door. They also elected the majority and the minority leaders. That being said, this is really just some administrative stuff that every Congress has to go through. Nothing really of substance here in this first section. So next, let's go to bins. So I need to say this to start out. The first 7 House resolutions are essentially administrative stuff. Everything after that is bills, and they only went up to 12 before switching to the next section and then coming back. So we will go over 7, 8, 9, 10, and 12. We are currently going to skip 11 because I need the text document, and I do not have the text document for that yet to really fully understand what this bill is about. So, with 7, recognizing the importance of access to comprehensive, high-quality, life-affirming medical care for women of all ages. Essentially, this is just affirming that women are going to be able to get the medical care they need to be able to live. I would clearly vote yes on this. Honestly, everybody has the right to be healthy. And if you are denying people of that right, you are doing an injustice to the American people. Now, let's go to 8. Reaffirming the House of Representatives' commitment to ensuring secure elections through the United States by recognizing that the presentation of valid photograph identification is a fundamental component of secure elections. I personally disagree with this, as there are millions of Americans that do not have a photograph ID issued by the state or the government. Meaning, this would essentially just be voter suppression. I am not here for voter suppression. If you're trying to suppress the people's votes, you're no better than the people that enacted Jim Crow laws after the Civil War. All right, let's go to 9. Reaffirming that the United States is not a party to the Rome Statute and does not recognize the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court. This one, I kind of want to vote no on, but I would vote yes only because we as Americans should only be subject to our own court. Meaning, unless I go to another country, commit crimes in their lands, and then stay there, I should not be able to be prosecuted by another entity that is not ran by American citizens. Now, at the same time, I do disagree with breaking of the Geneva Convention and committing war crimes. Let's go to 10. Amending the rules of the House of Representatives to establish a committee on health and a standing committee of the House. I butchered the title on that. Essentially what this bill is just saying that we should have a health committee as a standing committee in the House, and I agree with that. We should definitely have a committee that is looking for ways to help the American people stay healthy, because a healthy working class creates a healthy economy. It's just that simple. Now, 11, the it's not very descriptive in the information that I have available to me at this time, and I'll have to see the whole text document to be able to fully understand what the certain authorizing committees are going to be. Because if I do not know who the authorizing committees are, I cannot tell you whether it's a good idea or not. So we are just going to skip straight to 12, which is amending the rules of the House of Representatives to prohibit the consideration of a concurrent resolution to provide for a resolution of the House after July 31st of any year unless the House has approved each regular appropriation bill for the next fiscal year. Essentially, this is just moving the time frame to a little bit earlier in the year. I agree with this, as we have constantly had issues coming down into the new year, the new fiscal year, where we do not have a continuing resolution signed, resulting in a government shutdown. And if you don't know, government shutdowns are bad. It stops work, it stops payment. It is just all around not a good thing. And to add a side note on this, I completely disagree with using the budget as a political tool. On to our next section, House Joint Resolutions. Now, these are proposed amendments to our Constitution. That being said, we got some interesting ones. The first one is proposing an amendment to the Constitution of the United States to require that the Supreme Court of the United States be comprised of 9 justices. No. We have had different numbers of justices on the court historically, and I believe that this is a matter that should be left up to Congress and should adjust based on some population metrics as well as different. House Joint Resolution 2, proposing a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution of the United States. I would pass this. There should be a balanced budget. There should always be a balanced budget. If we don't have a balanced budget, we're just going to dig a deeper hole into debt, and we're already way too far into debt as a country for me to be fully comfortable. House Joint Resolution 3, proposing an amendment to the Constitution of the United States relative to a balancing of the budget. Obviously, I would say yes to this. It's just another version of that same bill, same amendment. House Joint Resolution 4, proposing an amendment to the Constitution of the United States to provide that debate upon legislation pending before the Senate may not be brought to a close without the concurrence of a minimum of 3/5 of the senators. I like this. This means that we're either going to get to the bottom of it, or we're going to realize that we're too frustrated over it to be able to come to a nice, clear, clean. Let's move on to House Joint Resolution 5, proposing an amendment to the Constitution of the United States to limit the number of terms an individual may serve as a member of Congress. Yes, there should be term limits on Congress members, definitely. That should have been a thing from the beginning, and I am actually kind of sad that this was not put into place when we put the term limits into place on the president. If we're going to check power, we should be checking all power, not just one. Joint Resolution 6, proposing an amendment to the Constitution of the United States to provide a balanced budget for the government. Yes, the government should have a balanced budget. It goes more with not putting us in debt, and also that is a step towards our government passing. All of us have agreed to a concurrent resolution on the budget for the fiscal year prior to the beginning of that fiscal year. As much as I would love to say yes, because this is one of Congress's main, I would say no to this one, because you are saying because one objective wasn't met in a timely manner, that you are not going to be paid at all. In my opinion, that would breed a lot of negative ill intent and would cause issues, because if we are not paying our representatives, what incentive do they actually have to show up and do their... So yeah, House Joint Resolution 7, I'm going to pass on that one. All right, let's move on to House Joint Resolution 8, proposing amendment to the Constitution of the United States to provide certain line item veto authority to the president. Definitely not. Most definitely not. The reason I would vote no on this is very, very simple. If I have a bill that has stuff in it for the Republicans, and it also has stuff in it for the Democrats, it has passed the House, it has passed the Senate, the president should not be able to go, well, I don't agree with that party, I'm going to remove all the line items of stuff that they want, and only my party's getting what we want. That's what this amendment would open us up to. Not down for it. Let's move on to House Joint Resolution 9. Proposing an amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America, prohibiting the United States government from increasing its debt except for a specific purpose by law appointed by 3/4 of the membership of each House of Congress. Yeah, I'm fine with that. We should honestly stop raising our debt limit and focus on balancing our budget so we can pay down our debt. Because once again, I am uncomfortable with the high levels of debt that our country has. So let's move on to House Joint Resolution 10, proposing a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution of the United States. I feel like we just went over one extremely similar. Yes, pass it. We need a balanced budget. House Joint Resolution 11, proposing a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution requiring that each agency and department's funding is justified. Yes, completely agree with this. Justify the funding. If the funding's not justified, the funding shouldn't be there. Once again, I feel like this is a step towards our government passing all of its audits as it should, as that is American tax dollars. So now we are going to move back over to House resolutions, and we are going to start where we left off. Keep in mind, the number does jump all the way to House Resolution 21. Move on to House Resolution 1. To amend Title 18 United States Code to prohibit a healthcare provider from failing to exercise the proper degree of care in the case of a child who survives an abortion or attempted abortion. Clearly, if they survived, the point that you would know they survived, they are a human. Definitely, healthcare providers should be taking care of that. House Resolution 22, to amend the National Voter Registry Act of 1993 to require proof of United States citizenship to register an individual to vote in elections for federal office and for other purposes. I kind of have mixed feelings on this. Personally, at this time, I would vote no, as a survey done by Brennan Center for Justice says that roughly 21.3 million Americans do not readily have proof of citizenship. Now, that being said, if that many Americans don't have proof of citizenship, that's roughly over 9% of the American population. So that would be a massive voter suppression, and I am not here for voter suppression. Now, House Resolution 23, to impose sanctions with respect to the International Criminal Court engaged in any effort to investigate, arrest, detain, or prosecute any protected person of the United States and its allies. As I already said, we as Americans are not subject to any other court. So without saying, obviously I would vote no. H.R. 24, to require a full audit of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System and the Federal Reserve Banks by the Comptroller General of the United States and for other purposes. So essentially, yeah, we should be doing a full audit of the Federal Reserve System. That's part of not having a giant breakdown that leads to something akin to the 2008 housing crash. H.R. 25, to promote freedom, fairness, economic opportunity by repealing the income tax and other taxes, abolishing the Internal Revenue Service, and enacting a national sales tax to be administered primarily by the states. I disagree. On the surface, this sounds like a good-hearted bill, and it sounds great. However, in doing so, you would disproportionately affect the lower and middle class. Because think about it. If you only have $200 to spend on groceries, and let's say they make the sales tax 30% to cover for not having a income tax. Well, this effectively would mean that the lower income individuals in this country would lose more buying power than the wealthy portion of the country. And I'm not down for that. We should be helping the lower and middle class, help them get on their feet, help them get to a point where they are making enough money to sustain a living, not making it harder on them. So clearly I would vote no. H.R. 26, to prohibit a memorandum on the use of hydraulic fracturing. So, from my understanding, this is just fracking. No, I would not prohibit a memorandum on that. If a situation comes up where fracking is made to not be legal, while it works its way through the court system, because there'd obviously be a lawsuit filed by the fracking companies, I believe that it should be up to the judge in charge whether to put a memorandum or a stay on the situation. H.R. 27, to amend the Controlled Substance Act with respect to scheduling of fentanyl-related substances and for other purposes. Cool, reschedule fentanyl. I don't care, pass it. Fentanyl is dangerous, it is deadly. I understand that there are some medical uses. In my opinion, it should be a category 2. Just with the given knowledge that there are some situations in which fentanyl is used medically. But overall, fentanyl is abused, and we should have it as a higher class of drug. H.R. 28, to amend the Education Amendments of 1972 to provide that for purposes of determining compliance with Title IX of such activities in athletics, sex shall be recognized based solely on a person's reproductive biology and genetics at birth. This one is essentially just saying keep trans athletes out of female sports, which I am fine with. It is sports. There is a definite advantage that men have in sports, for a majority of sports anyways. I mean, we can argue it in wrestling, that there isn't really a competitive advantage, as yes, the guy has more testosterone. However, females have more flexible shoulder joints, right? There's a little bit of an offset there. But at the same time, we need to recognize that there are situations that men and women are differently suited to. So yes, I would pass this. Now, at the same time, it bothers me that this even has to be made an issue. As per my understanding, there are less than 10 trans athletes in all of NCAA. H.R. 29. To require the Secretary of Homeland Security to take into custody aliens who have been charged in the United States with theft and for other purposes. Yes, if you are an alien, legal or illegal, until you become a United States citizen, you should not be able to break the law. If you break the law during this period, it kind of needs to be more like a probationary period in the first place. Like when you go work for a company, generally there's a 90-day probationary period. I foresee in a future getting our immigration on a better time clock to where people aren't just sitting around with their specific situation sitting in limbo. That being said, yes, I would pass this law. H.R. 30, to amend the Immigration and Nationality Act to provide that aliens who have been convicted of or who have committed sex offenses or domestic violence are inadmissible and deportable. H.R. 31, to make the assault of a law enforcement officer a deportable offense and for other purposes. Yes, if you assault a police officer, you're breaking the law. Now, H.R. 32, to provide that sanctuary jurisdictions that provide benefits to aliens who are present in the United States without lawful status under the immigration laws are ineligible for federal funds intended to benefit such aliens. In my opinion, this is a states' rights issue and should not be taken up by the federal government. 33, to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to provide special rules for the taxation of certain residents of Taiwan with income from sources within the United States. I am still waiting for a text document to be made of this bill. Sadly, there still is not one. I'm going to put it this way. If what they are asking for is to reduce those taxes, no. I vote no on that. If they're asking to increase those taxes, I would also vote no. It is income tax regardless, and the income tax should be accounted for appropriately, regardless of your residency. R34, to deposit portions of revenue generated from public lands into a Social Security trust fund. So, Social Security has been borrowed from in the past. This would just essentially be repaying that. And yes, I agree with that. Let's repay that. Let's have the government pay into that system a little bit. Let's help people retire. So hopefully we don't have to move the retirement age. It makes sense. With H.R. 35, to impose criminal and immigration penalties for intentionally fleeing a pursuing federal officer while operating a motor vehicle. Yeah. if you are being pulled over, pull over. It's not that hard. It's already called evading. I don't know why we need another bill for it, but sure, pass it. H.R. 36 I do have a problem with. They did not give it a proper title that describes anything. It's literally TO, period. That's all they put. There is no text document available at this time. I will try to circle back and cover H.R. 36 once there is a text document available that I can actually view and read and understand what this bill is supposed to be about. So we're going to move on to H.R. 37, proposing a federal debt limit amendment to the Constitution of the United States. Well, dang. That is very simple. Yes, there should be a debt limit amendment. We shouldn't be digging ourselves further and further in debt every year. We should be working to pay off that debt because essentially, right now, the way our debt works, it's like a credit card. Except the bank doesn't decide what the cap is. Congress does. And Congress keeps raising it and raising it and raising it. And we keep ending up more and more and more in debt. Yes, put a limit on it. Please stop the hemorrhaging. H.R. 38, to amend Title 18 United States Code to provide a means by which non-residents of a state whose residents may carry concealed firearms may also do so in the state. That's pretty clear and obvious that should already be a thing. I can't remember what the actual term is, but in America, you have the right to go to any state and enjoy the freedoms that that state has, regardless of what your state says. So, with that understanding, H.R. 38 shouldn't have to be passed. At the same time, I do agree with passing it because it's just reiterating a point. H.R. 39, to amend Title 38 United States Code to direct the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to establish the Merchant Mariner Equality Compensation Fund to provide benefits to certain individuals who served in the United States Merchant Marine, including the Army Transport Service and the Naval Transport Service during World War II. I am fine with that. During World War II, the Merchant Marines did a lot to help our military. And from my understanding, some even lost their lives in certain events, such as the Battle of Normandy. So clearly, they should be afforded veterans benefits. That should have already been done. It's kind of appalling that it hasn't been done. But let's continue. H.R. 40. Now, this one's a long one, so bear with me. To address the fundamental injustice, cruelty, brutality, and inhumanity of slavery in the United States and the 13 American colonies between 1619 and 1865, and to establish a commission to study and consider a national apology and proposal for reparations for the institution of slavery, its subsequent de jure and de facto racial and economic discrimination against African Americans, and the impact of these forces on living African Americans, to make recommendations to the Congress on appropriate remedies and for other purposes. You know, I'm going to vote yes on this. And here's why. I am tired of hearing about reparations wanting to be had. Let's do it. Let's give reparations. Stop letting the situation fester so we can just be done with the whole issue. That is my view on it. Let's just take care of it, rip the Band-Aid off, get it done. H.R. 41. To provide for the recognition of certain Alaska Native communities and the settlement of certain claims under Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act and for other purposes. Listen. Alaska was their land to begin with. So obviously I'm going to pass it. It's not a hard thing to understand. H.R. 42. To amend the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act to exclude certain payments to aged, blind, or disabled Alaskan Natives or descendants of Alaskan Natives from being used to determine eligibility for certain programs and for other purposes. Yeah, don't use that as eligibility for certain programs, sure. I would like to understand more the point that they're trying to drive home here. I am checking once again as I am recording this to make sure there isn't a text document available. There is currently not a text document available. H.R. 43. To amend the Alaska Natives Claims Settlement Act to provide that village corporations shall not be required to convey land in trust to the state of Alaska for the establishment of municipal corporations and for other purposes. Yeah, pass that one. H.R. 44. To amend Title III of the Public Health Service Act to include rural emergency hospitals in the definition of a covered entity for purposes of 340B drug discount program. Yes, let's make medication affordable for all Americans. This is a step in that direction. H.R. 45. To amend Title 41 United States Code to prohibit the federal government from entering into contracts with an entity that discriminates against the firearms and ammunition industry and for other purposes. I'm going to vote no on this. I understand the want to protect guns. Here's the thing. Guns are already protected under the Second Amendment. Just because an entity opposes something that you view politically does not mean that it is without value or merit to our society. Therefore, this bill should not be passed, in my opinion. H.R. 46. To direct the Federal Communications Commission, FCC, to prioritize the timely processing of certain long-form applications in the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund Phase 2 auction. Yes, our government should be doing stuff in a timely manner. This is just part of that. H.R. 47. To establish the Victims of Immigration Crime Engagement Office within the Department of Homeland Security and for other purposes. Cool. Establish it. Realize that this would essentially be an agency. It's underneath the Homeland Security, so it is technically a department. And if you can justify the funding for it, fine. Pass it. H.R. 48. To amend the Public Health Service Act to ensure that women seeking an abortion receive an ultrasound and the opportunity to review the ultrasound before giving informed consent to receive an abortion. So what I gather from this is they want to force women to look at an ultrasound before being allowed to make a informed decision about their body. Now, my thoughts on this are no. The reason my thoughts on this are no is there are certain situations in which a person already cannot carry a child to term, and it would create an undue health risk to those specific individuals to not get an abortion. That being said, you should not be making the decision that is already hard enough on people even harder. So no. Definitely voting no on H.R. 48. H.R. 49. To prohibit the use of federal funds for the HHS Reproductive Health Care Access Task Force. No. Stop trying to take funding away from things that need to be happening. H.R. 50. To prohibit grants provided under Section 106 of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974 from being used to assist persons who are neither a national of the United States nor lawfully admitted for permanent residence and for other purposes. Yeah, I would pass this bill. Because here's the thing. These are tax dollars. In my opinion, things that take tax dollars need to be prioritized for citizens. Meaning that we should not be giving these grants to people who are not permanent residents here, especially since we kind of have a housing crisis on our hands at this time. H.R. 51. To provide for the admission of the state of Washington, D.C. into the Union. Yes, do it. Make D.C. the 51st state. Personally, while we're at it, let's go ahead and take all of these territories that are not currently a part of the U.S., even though they are American citizens, and let's make those people, let's let those be states as well. For example, Puerto Rico, right? This is my firm belief on all topics of this matter. If American citizens are there, and it is a American territory, it should be made a state. That goes for DC, that goes for Puerto Rico, that goes for any others that we have, because those are American citizens whose voices deserve to be heard, whose tax dollars go into the system. So without passing this, that would be taxation without representation. And I am not down for that. All right, now we got H.R. 52 to require the Securities and Exchange Commission to amend a rule of the commission related to shareholder proposals and for other purposes. Double checking right now. When I checked earlier on, there was no text document, and it looks like, yes, there's still no text document available. I will try to circle back to H.R. 52 in a future episode when there is an actual text document available to review. H.R. 53. To cancel certain proposed changes to credit fees charged by the Federal National Mortgage Association and the Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corporation and for other purposes. Yeah, those proposed changes, if they're already going to take effect, this is just some infighting, in my opinion, that will not lead to a lot of good. However, I could be wrong. But at this time, with the information given, I would vote no on that. H.R. 54, to direct the President to withdraw the United States from the Constitution of the World Health Organizations and for other purposes. No. Stop trying to screw over Americans' health. H.R. 55, to repeal the National Voter Registration Act of 1993. No. Stop it. That's voter suppression. If you're going to try voter suppression, just say that. I'm tired of sitting here reading bills that are voter suppression. This one, for example. And if you don't know what the National Voter Registration Act of 1993 is, that is what allows you, for when you go into the DMV and do anything with the DMV, to be able to update your registration, your voter registration, there on the spot with the DMV and with other entities. Quite simply, that would just make an extra step, an extra trip that somebody has to make to get registered to vote. It is clear voter suppression. We're just going no with that. H.R. 56, to transfer certain responsibilities of the United States Secretary of Service to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I read that wrong, so let me fix what I said. United States Secret Service. So, that being said, yeah, sure. We already saw that 2 assassination attempts were taken on the president. Well, president-elect at this time. Clearly, the Secret Service has a little bit too much on their plate. Let the FBI step in and take over a little bit of those responsibilities. Perfectly fine. It's just a reallocation of duties. H.R. 57, to amend the Immigration and Nationality Act with respect to the parole or release of an asylum participant and for other purposes. Yeah, sure, do that. Once again, come here legally, don't break the law. Very simple rules to follow. H.R. 58, to amend the Immigration and Nationality Act to make voting in federal election by an unlawful present alien an aggregated felony and for other purposes. Sure. Keep foreigners out of our elections. Makes sense. H.R. 59, to specify the state of mind required for conviction of criminal offenses that lack an expressly identified state of mind and for other purposes. Yes, state of mind when you commit a crime should be taken into account. If, for some reason, you are not in the proper state of mind when you commit a crime, I'm not saying that you should go unpunished. I am saying that certain allowances should be made and things should be made to be fair under the law. H.R. 60, to protect the right of law-abiding citizens to transport knives interstate, notwithstanding a patchwork of state and local prohibitions that burden citizens. What this is saying is if you live in a place where, let's say, a switchblade is legal, and you are moving to another place where a switchblade is legal, but in order to get there, you have to pass through a city, a state, a county what have you, where that switchblade is illegal and you get pulled over, your car gets searched during your move, they should not be able to charge you with that switchblade because you are going from one place where it's legal to another. You are not out there using the switchblade in public. You are not carrying that switchblade in public. You are just simply transporting your property from one place where your property is legal to another place where your property is legal. I feel on this issue the same I would if it was a gun, if it was marijuana, if it was almost anything under the sun. Alcohol, for example. H.R. 16, to amend the Wilberforce Tracking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act of 2008, to clarify the standards for family detention and other purposes. Yeah, let's add some clarity to the standards. Please. The more clear you can be on a law, the less legal arguments and loopholes there are in that law. H.R. 62, to prohibit federal funds from being awarded or otherwise made available to the Fulton County District's Attorney Office. Okay, guys, make this very simple. Just because your presidential candidate was being investigated for crimes and was being charged for crimes does not mean that the jurisdiction looking into those crimes did anything wrong. Don't take funding away from them. Because you take funding away from them, they're not going to be able to prosecute the actual criminals. Okay? Okay. H.R. 63 is the same thing, only regarding Manhattan District Attorney's Office. Same thing I said. Just no. Stop it. No. H.R. 64, to require the Secretary of Homeland Security to detain any alien who is unlawfully present in the United States and is arrested for certain criminal offenses. Sure. Once again, come here legally, follow the laws. Not that hard. H.R. 65, to amend the Endangered Species Act of 1973 to further restrict the Secretary of the Interior from designating certain lands used for national defense-related purposes as a critical habitat for any species under that act, and to broaden exclusions and exemptions from that act for such defense-related purposes. This one takes a little bit of thought for me. I would vote yes. That being said, my reasoning behind voting yes is, while yes, we should be protecting the environment, protecting the species that live in the environment that we live in. However, being able to defend ourselves comes first. H.R. 66, to amend Chapter 131 of Title V, United States Code, to require Senator Executive Service and Schedule C employees to disclose federal student loan debt and for other purposes. No. You should not have to be judged on student loan debt when it is this expensive to go to college. If you want to fix the issue that you're trying to fix, work on making college affordable. H.R. 67, to improve retrospective reviews of federal regulations and for other purposes. From my understanding, it sounds like they want to pump the reviews with a bunch of positive fake reviews. This would be like going to Amazon to order a product. You look at the product rating, and it's a 4.7. That's a great rating. But then if you actually investigate, it's really only a 2.6 that just has a bunch of fake 5-star reviews. That's what that sounds like to me. So I'd vote no on that. H.R. 68, to authorize funds to prevent housing discrimination through the use of nationwide testing to increase funds for the Fair Housing Initiatives program and for other purposes. Yes, we have a housing crisis. This is going to help us fix that. Let's do it. H.R. 69, to amend Title 29 District of Columbia Official Code to treat meetings held by nonprofit organizations with officials of the federal government which are held in the District of Columbia at locations owned or leased by the federal government as activities not consulting during business in the District of Columbia for purposes of determining whether such organizations are required to register with the District of Columbia. Essentially, if a nonprofit wants to have a meeting with a senator, they should be able to do that without having to register in the District of Columbia. But be able to do it in the District of Columbia at the senator's convenience. It makes sense. Pass it. H.R. 70, to prohibit the administration of general services from awarding contracts for certain commercial payment systems under the Smart Pay program and for other purposes. No. Allow the Smart Pay program. Stop making it harder for people to pay shit. H.R. 71, to direct the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to carry out a pilot program to improve the availability of veterans to access medical care in medical facilities of the Department of Veterans Affairs and in the community, providing the veterans the ability to choose healthcare providers. Essentially, make veterans' health care better. Yes. And I am saying this not just as a veteran myself, but as somebody who very much wants to thank veterans and show veterans the thanks for serving for our country. H.R. 72, to amend Title 38 United States Code to direct the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to furnish hydrobolic oxygen therapy to veterans with traumatic brain injury or post-traumatic disorder. Now, I am not a doctor, but I believe this would be a good thing. So pass it. H.R. 73, to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to provide that amounts paid for an abortion are not taken into account for purposes of the deduction of medical expenses. No. An abortion is healthcare. Stop gunning for abortion. H.R. 74, to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to allow for tax advantage distributions from health savings accounts during family or medical leave and for other purposes. Yeah, sure. Once again, better healthcare. H.R. 75, to require the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development and the Secretary of Agriculture to withdraw a final determination relating to energy efficiency standards for housing and for other purposes. you want to, from my understanding, they want to deregulate efficiency standards. No. Those efficiency standards are there for a reason. They're there to protect the environment, and they're there to allow for longevity of housing developments. H.R. 76. To establish a separate account in the Treasury to hold deposits to be used to secure the southern border of the United States and for other purposes. Yeah, sure. Secure the border. I'll pass that bill. However, can we fix our immigration system, please? Because I have not seen a single bill that actually fixes our immigration system. H.R. 77. To amend Chapter 8, Title 8, United States Code to provide for en bloc consideration in resolutions of disapproval for midnight rules and for other purposes. Yeah, no, midnight rules need to stay in place. To amend Title 18 United States Code to prohibit certain abortion procedures and for... No, just stop. Once again, stop coming after abortion. H.R. 79. To nullify certain executive orders regarding COVID-19 vaccine mandates and to prohibit the Secretary of Labor from issuing a rule mandating vaccination against COVID-19 and other purposes. For this, I would like to refer back to a Supreme Court decision made in 1904 about the measles vaccine, where they essentially said that you need to get the vaccine because it is not your right to endanger fellow citizens with your noncompliance. More or less what that opinion said. No, this is not legal advice. I am just going off of information that I have, and I am not a lawyer. But under that understanding, and as I agree with that understanding, I would vote no on this bill. However, if a bill is offered that would do better research into the COVID-19 vaccines to decide whether they should be used or not, and to create better COVID-19 vaccines, then I'd be for it. H.R. 80. To revoke the security clearance of certain former members of the intelligence community and for other purposes. Yes. Once you are done dealing with classified information, you should no longer have the security clearance to deal with classified information. H.R. 81. To prohibit imposition of mask mandates on public transportation. Okay, hear me out on this one before I give you a solid answer. So, in regards to the mask mandates in general, the issue with the mask mandates is freedom. However, to revert back to Supreme Court decision made in 1904, you do not have a right to endanger other citizens. So, if in the event of another pandemic, masks should be worn in confined spaces. Yes, a city bus is a confined space. And the reason why you can't just be, well, the people that are concerned should wear a mask and those that aren't shouldn't have to, is because you can get sick by taking in the sickness through your eyes. Meaning, there is no real reasonable way, unless you wear goggles and a mask, to protect yourself. So we should be working on protecting all Americans in this situation. And there is no actual negative side effect to wearing a mask. Is it annoying? Sure. Does it suck? Yes. Did I hate the mask mandates? Yes. But to straight up prohibit them would be an injustice to the health of other American citizens. So I would vote no on this one. H.R. 82. To provide that none of the funds made available to the National Endowment of the Humanities for a fiscal year may be used to carry out Section 7 of the National Foundation on Arts and Humanities, Act of 1965. Voting no. Arts and humanities are important. They are culturally important, to say the very least. So no. H.R. 83. To amend Part A of Title I of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965 to allow states, in accordance with state law, to let federal funds of the education of disadvantaged children follow low-income children to the public school, charter school, accredited private school, or supplemental education service program they attend, and for other purposes. I'm going to be really blunt with this one. Our tax dollars for education need to go to public schools. Period. If you have a private school where tuition is paid, you should not be profiting off the tax dollars of the American citizens. So I would vote no on this, because that is taking money from the children who are disadvantaged that have to go to public school and don't have the opportunity to do others. House Resolution 84. To expand opportunity of Native American children through additional options in education and for other purposes. Yes. Most definitely. As we as a nation took a lot from the tribes. Therefore, we need to be paying back the tribes. H.R. 85. To amend the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938 to allow the pooling of tips among all employees for other purposes. No. Voting no. If I work as a server, mind you, most servers in this country are not even paid minimum wage. If I work as a server, I do a stellar job, so I get a stellar tip. I should not be forced to share that tip with another server who maybe has a lackluster of customer service skills. So they don't get tipped out nearly as much or nearly as often. When you are in an industry like that, just like in sales, It'd be like saying that you have to pull all the commissions from the company and split it evenly. That people would lose their mind if you said that. Which is why I do not agree with H.R. 85. H.R. 86. To abolish the Occupational Safety Health Administration and for other purposes. Don't get rid of OSHA. OSHA is actually very important to the safety and well-being of individuals. It is through OSHA that you have the right to protect yourself at work from your employer putting you in dangerous situations. It is what gives you the right to say, hey, I'm in a confined space where somebody is cutting concrete. I need to be given the proper PPE, or we need to find a way to do the work in a non-confined space where you're going to get the asphalt or cement dust in your lungs. Very simple. H.R. 87. To amend the Public Health Service Act to prohibit the Secretary of Health and Human Services from placing any vaccine for COVID-19 on a child or adolescent immunization schedule unless the Secretary has posted on the public website of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention all clinical data in the possession of the Department of Health and Human Services related to the health and efficiency of such vaccine and for other purposes. Yes. This is fine. That's what I mean. Add the proper research to the vaccine and then make it mandatory. Just like you do the proper investigation on the measles vaccine and they made it mandatory. H.R. 88. To amend the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act to exempt from regulations as devices, non-invasive diagnostic devices, and for other purposes. I'm sorry, but if you are using tools, even if they are not invasive, in a healthcare setting, they need to be approved by the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Like, it's very simple. Stop trying to pass bills that would endanger the health of everyday Americans. H.R. 89. To repeal the authority of the Food and Drug Administration to require that drugs be dispensed only upon prescription and for other purposes. Now, I do not have a full text document available to me at this time, even double checking now. Yep, still don't have it at this time. That being said, if this bill is only talking about behind-the-counter medication, medication that you already need a prescription for, that's fine. Completely agree with that. It's already technically in place. However, if this is going to cover things such as Ibuprofen, Tylenol, Advil, I'm sorry, I should be able to go to the store and get those without having to get a doctor's note or a prescription. Cold medicine, too, for example. So depending on what the actual text of that bill says, which I do not have that text document, but that is how I would look at it and how I would vote with or against it. Now I'm going to preface this next one by, I do not read Roman numerals. It's something that honestly I think we need to go away from. But let's jump into H.R. 90. To amend Title XXVII of the Public Health Service Act to provide for a definition of short-term limited duration insurance and for other purposes. Not entirely sure what this one is about, other than it has something to do with insurance. I am assuming that this is probably going to be something in the realm of giving you insurance in the case that you lose your job or something. That's what it sounds like to me, just based on the title. And that would make sense. Let's keep America healthy. H.R. 91. To abolish the Agency of Toxic Substances and Diseases Registry and for other purposes. I'm sorry, no, that is needed. I would not agree with abolishing that. I think if anything, if you really want to get rid of that, merge it with the FDA and make those responsibilities the FDA's responsibilities. H.R. 92. To provide for the development of a plan to increase oil and gas production under oil and gas leases of federal lands under the jurisdiction of the Secretary of Agriculture, the Secretary of Energy, the Secretary of Interior, and the Secretary of Defense, in conjunction with a drawdown of petroleum reserves from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. So, I would pass this just because it would help alleviate some of the gas prices. However, I also want to preference this with saying that I don't necessarily agree with pulling from the petroleum reserve if we don't have to. The petroleum reserve is realistically there for in the event of a war where we either get cut off from our other supply chains of oil and gas, as well as if we ever get sanctioned. So I think running the reserve like that, probably not the best idea. I definitely agree with the other part of the bill. But yeah, no, I would probably vote yes on H.R. 92. H.R. 93. To prohibit funding to the Special Representative for Racial Equality and Justice of the Department of State and for other purposes. Stop attacking civil rights stuff. Stop attacking us trying to make the world a better place for more people. It is very clear that America does have a racism problem and has had a racism problem. So no, I would not vote on that. H.R. 94. To terminate the designation of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan as a major non-NATO ally. Yeah, with how much stuff is going on in the Middle East, I would agree with that. The only consideration I have for not voting for that is it would greatly worsen relations in the Middle East, in my opinion. However, that is just an entire situation that really needs to be dealt with sooner or later, and preferably through peaceful means and not through war. H.R. 95. To require that each bill enacted by Congress be limited to only one subject and for other purposes. Yeah. Please. Single issue bills. That would be awesome. Just single issue bills. H.R. 96. To prevent agencies from using unmanned aerial vehicles to conduct surveillance of United States citizens and for other purposes. Yeah. Honestly, stop surveilling citizens unless you have a probable cause to do so, such as believing that they may be part of a terrorist cell. H.R. 97. To amend Title 28 United States Code to prohibit the issuance of national injections and other purposes. Yeah, no. I believe, if I'm understanding this right, this goes back to vaccine mandates. I've already stated 1904 Supreme Court decision. I don't know why we're trying to go against that. That has historical precedent. Stop it. H.R. 98. To repeal certain unnecessary criminal offenses and for other purposes. Yes, if we have criminal offenses on the book that aren't necessary, get rid of them. Please. All right, let's move on to H.R. 99. To require a particular jury instruction in federal civil actions that include a claim for damages based on negligence arising from the transmission of COVID-19. Yeah, sure. I'd probably pass that. H.R. 100. To amend Rule 23 of Federal Rules of Civil Procedure to protect the gig economy and small businesses that operate in large part through contractor services from the threat of costly class action litigation and for other purposes. Yeah, I feel like you shouldn't be able to be sued over stuff that a contractor does. That makes sense. H.R. 101. To amend Title 28 United States Code to divide the Ninth Judicial Court of the United States into two circuits and for other purposes. Yeah, go ahead and do that. We have a backlog right now in our justice system. This would probably help alleviate some of that. H.R. 102. To amend the Endangered Species Act of 1973 to prevent a species that is not native to the United States from being listed as an endangered species or a threatened species, to prohibit certain types of financial assistance. No. H.R. 103. To provide members of Congress lawful access to certain Indian land to access the security of the international boundary between the United States and Mexico located on the Indian land and for other purposes. Yeah, that's fine. H.R. 104. To amend Title 54 United States Code to prohibit the extension or establishment of national monuments in Arizona except by express authorization of Congress. Yeah, national monuments should be appointed by Congress. Sure. H.R. 105. To amend Title 54 United States Code to increase public access to recreational areas on federal land. Yes, let's increase access to recreational areas. That's awesome. H.R. 106. To amend the Endangered Species Act of 1973 to provide for improved precision in the listing, delisting, downlisting of endangered species and potential endangered species. Yeah, that sounds good. Pass that. H.R. 107, to require executive agencies to reinstate telework policies that were in place on December 31st, 2019, and for other purposes. No, I don't think they should have to. I think if they're getting just as much, if not more, work done from home, we should allow them to stay at home and possibly free up some office space that we don't have to pay for. H.R. 108, to allow the Administrator of National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, to establish a research center for deep space and interplanetary research and for other purposes. Probably would be a good thing. H.R. 109, to require the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to formally recognize caregivers of veterans, notify veterans and caregivers of clinical determinations relating to eligibility for caregiver programs, and temporarily extend benefits for veterans who are determined ineligible for the family caregiver program and for other purposes. Yes, more help for our veterans. H.R. 110, to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to extend the deduction for qualified businesses' income and for other purposes. Sure, why not? More money for the business, I guess. I hope that some trickle down will happen. Probably won't, as we've seen that it hasn't, but one can hope eventually. H.R. 111, to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to allow the above-the-line deduction for health insurance premiums. Yes, let's do that. Make healthcare more affordable. That sounds awesome. H.R. 112, to repeal the Department of Agriculture bioenergy subsidiary programs and other related subsidiary programs. No. H.R. 113, to remove the discretionary inflator from the baseline to provide that the salaries of members of the House of Congress will be held in escrow if that House has not agreed to a concurrent resolution on the budget for fiscal year 2026 and for other purposes. I like this. So essentially, they'll get their money after they pass the continuing resolution. This is better than the no money at all for missing the deadline. I am 14. It's H.R. 114. To repeal the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act and the Healthcare Education Reconciliation Act of 2010. No. This is what I say about the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act is what makes sure that you don't get kicked off your health insurance for using your health insurance. H.R. 115. To establish a penalty for the Department of Housing and Urban Development for failure to enforce compliance with the Public Housing Community Service and self-sufficiency requirement under law. Pass that. H.R. 116. To close loopholes in the immigration laws that serve as incentives to aliens to attempt to enter the United States unlawfully and for other purposes. Yes, let's fix some of our immigration system. That sounds awesome. H.R. 117. To repeal the Foreign Intelligence Service Act. Yeah, no. Just no. H.R. 118. To prohibit the use of forfeited funds made available to certain state or local law enforcement agencies pursuant to equitable sharing for certain purposes. Yeah, prohibit that. H.R. 119, to prohibit any entity that receives federal funds from the COVID-19 relief packages from mandating employees receive a COVID-19 vaccine. Okay, once again, defaulting to the 1904 Supreme Court decision, so I would be voting no. H.R. 120, to prohibit COVID-19 vaccine mandates and other purposes. Nope. H.R. 121, to prohibit agencies from issuing vaccine passports and for other purposes. Nope. H.R. 122, to amend the Fair Labor Standards Act to provide for the accumulation of the minimum wage based on the federal supplemental poverty threshold for a renter family of 4 with 2 children under the age of 18 as determined by the Bureau of Census and for other purposes. Yes. Let's raise the minimum wage and make the minimum wage livable again. H.R. 123, to direct that certain assessments with respect to toxicity of chemicals be carried out by the program offices of the Environmental Protection Agency and for other purposes. Yes. Let's, protect the environment. That would actually make a lot of sense. H.R. 124, to amend Title XIX of Social Security Act to provide incentives for education on risk of renewal, medullary capilloma in individuals who are receiving medical assistance under such title and who have sickle cell disease. Yes. Better healthcare for our people. I like it. H.R. 125, to amend the National Emergencies Act to provide that a national emergency declared by a president terminates 30 days after the declaration unless a joint resolution affirming such declaration is enacted into law and for other purposes. Yes, I agree with that. H.R. 126, to direct the Election Assistance Commission to carry out a pilot program under which the Commission shall provide funds to local educational agencies for initiatives to provide voter registration information to secondary school students in 12th grade. Yes, I like this because if you notate the Voters Registration Act of 1993, not everyone is getting their license. That's the thing. A lot of people nowadays are not actually going and getting their license at 16 to 18. So they're not registering to vote. When they do that, this would allow those people an additional opportunity to register to vote. I completely agree with that. It is the opposite of voter repression, and I love it. H.R. 127, to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to provide an exemption to the individual mandate to maintain health coverage for individuals residing in counties with fewer than 2 health insurance issuers offering plans on an exchange, to require members of Congress and congressional staff to abide by the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act with respect to health insurance coverage and for other purposes. Yes, I agree with that full-heartedly. H.R. 128, to require the Assistant Secretary for the Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction Office of the Department of Homeland Security to treat illicit fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction and for other purposes. No, this just furthers the war on drugs. I'm not into furthering the war on drugs. H.R. 129, to abolish the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives. No! I am sorry, but I would like to know if somebody is getting alcohol, that it's safe. I would like to know that if somebody is getting tobacco, that it's safe. I would like to be able to keep enforcing firearms regulations and explosives regulations. H.R. 130, to require the Secretary of the Interior to reissue regulations removing the gray wolf from the list of endangered and threatened wildlife under the Endangered Species Act of 1973. Now, I don't know that much about the gray wolf population, but this is my thoughts on it. If we pass that other bill that helps with the Endangerment Species Act, then we don't need this one, so I'm going to vote no on this one. H.R. 131, to make certain modifications to the repayment for the Arkansas Valley Conduit in the state of Colorado. I think modifying repayment after you've agreed to repayment is kind of shady, so I'm going to say no. H.R. 132, to amend the Water Infrastructure Improvements for the Nation Act to extend certain contract payment authority. Yes, do that one. H.R. 133, to prohibit a memorandum on the use of hydraulic fracturing. I feel like we already went through this at one point, but if we haven't, that's fine. No. That is within the judge's powers, not within Congress's powers, in my personal opinion. H.R. 134, to amend the Immigration and Nationality Act to provide for the detention, inadmissibility, and removal of aliens who commit sexual assault. Yes, we already covered something similar to that. H.R. 135, to designate the West Indian manatee as an endangered species under the Endangered Species Act of 1973 and for other purposes. Once again, if we agree with that other bill, this one's not needed. I would say no, just on those grounds. H.R. 136, to direct the Secretary of Veterans Affairs to conduct an independent review of the deaths of certain veterans by suicide and for other purposes. Yes. We should be looking more closely at what's going on with veteran suicide. Completely agree. 22 a day is a lot. Continuing to H.R. 37. So 137. To amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to make payment certain provisions of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Acts affecting individuals, families, and small businesses, and for other purposes. Yeah, sure, why not? H.R. 138, to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to allow expenses for parents to be taken into account as medical expenses and for other purposes. Yes. Help parents, help families. Good. House Resolution 139, to make daylight savings time permanent and for other purposes. I would pass this bill. Now, I know you got the argument of, well, what time should it really be set? My view on it is it does not matter at what time is actually set. If you have a set time, we no longer have to deal with the change in the spring forward, fall back system, and this would allow for actually less car accidents as it seems. During the 2 weeks after the changing of clocks either direction, we have always seen an uptick in traffic accidents, an uptick in negligent situations, and it's just overall damaging. So yeah, let's just go ahead and set the time at one time and stop changing it. I like that. H.R. 140, to provide tax relief for damages relating to Hurricane Helene and Milton. Yes. Help the American citizens get back on their feet that were affected by the natural disaster. That makes sense. H.R. 141, to amend Title III United States Code to include education on trailer safety and state highway safety programs. Pass that one. Completely agree. H.R. 142, to amend Chapter 8, Title 5 United States Code to provide that major rules of the executive branch shall have no force or effect unless a joint resolution of approval is enacted into law. No. Yes. I don't know on this one. This one's a tough one. So, better check the president's power is essentially what it's saying. Which would mean, say, major rules, the executive branch shall have no force or effect. Yeah, I don't like that. I'm going to say no on that one. H.R. 143, to establish a budgetary level restriction schedule and for other purposes. Yes, do it. H.R. 144, to provide that Federal Reports Elimination and Sunsets Act of 1995 does not apply to certain reports required to be submitted by the Tennessee Valley Authority and for other purposes. I am going to say no. H.R. 145, to amend the Securities Act of 1933 to permit an individual to invest in private issuers upon acknowledging the investment risk and for other purposes. I like this. I like this a lot. So, for example, I work at a company that has not gone public yet, so all the shares are private. It would be nice if I could buy, sell, or trade my shares while I'm waiting on the company to go public. H.R. 146, to amend the Federal Reserve Act to prohibit Federal Reserve banks from paying interest on excessive reserves. I'm sorry, but you should have to pay interest. So no. H.R. 147, to make improvements to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. Yes, do that. H.R. 148, to prohibit federal agencies from restricting the use of convertible virtual currency by a person to purchase goods or services for the person's own use and for other purposes. Yeah. Don't let them restrict how we spend our money. That's not up to them. I mean, it is, but it shouldn't be. H.R. 149, to ensure the members of Congress and congressional staff receive health care from the Department of Veterans Affairs instead of under the Federal Health Benefits Program or health care exchanges. I like this. So I would say yes to this, knowing that the Department of Veterans Affairs health system is definitely lower than the Federal Health Benefits Program or health care exchanges. However, so I would definitely vote this in because I do think this would force Congress to take better care of our veterans. H.R. 50, to establish the People-Centered Association Reform Effort Commission to inform the social safety net and increases social mobility by increasing access to resources which address the underlying cause of poverty. That was a mouthful. Yes, past that. H.R. 151, to require a citizenship question on the decentralized census, to require reporting on certain census statistics, and to modify appointment of representatives to be based on United States citizens instead of all persons. I agree with that. All that's saying is when they do restructuring for like electoral college votes and stuff like that, that we only count American citizens. I am fine with that. H.R. 152. To amend the Disaster Recovery Reform Act of 2018 to develop a study regarding streamlining and consolidating information collection and preliminary damage assessments and for other purposes. Yes, do that. H.R. 153. To provide for an online repository for certain reporting requirements for recipients of federal disaster assistance and for other purposes. Yes, do that. H.R. 154. To amend Title V United States Code to establish Election Day as a federal holiday. I like that. That would allow more people to be able to get out and vote properly. I do think that in some cases, it is going to force some parents to do early voting. But I think if you go ahead and make it a holiday, it's going to encourage more people to get out and vote. H.R. 155, to require states to permit unaffiliated voters to vote in primary elections for federal office and other purposes. Yes. In my opinions, all primaries should be open in the first place because we should want the best from both sides. H.R. 156, to ensure election integrity and security by establishing consent photo identification requirements for voting in elections for federal office and for other purposes. I'm going to go no, because there are millions of Americans that don't have photo ID. Tell me you want voter suppression without telling me. H.R. 157, to prohibit a single bill or joint resolution presented by Congress to the President from containing multiple subjects and to require the equal application of laws to members of Congress. Yes. Yes to that one entirely. H.R. 158, to require the use of independent, nonpartisan commissions to carry out congressional redistricting. I like this. We need independence to do this because of gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is bad and shouldn't happen. H.R. 159, to amend Title V United States Code to terminate pensions for members of Congress and for other purposes. I don't agree with terminating their pension. So I'd vote no. H.R. 160, to ensure election integrity and security and enhance Americans' access to the ballot box by establishing consistent standards and procedures for voter registration and voting in elections in federal office and for other purposes. Yes. H.R. 161, to amend sections 111, 169, and 171 of the Clean Air Act to clarify when a physical change in or change in the method of operation of a stationary source constitutes a modification or construction and for other purposes. Yes. H.R. 162, to provide for a right of action against federal employees for violations of the First Amendment rights. Yes. H.R. 163, to immediately resume construction of the border wall along the international border between the United States and Mexico to secure the border, enforce the rule of law, and extend appropriated funds as mandated by Congress and for other purposes. No. The Great Wall of America is a waste of taxpayer dollars. H.R. 164. To amend the Robert T. Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act to authorize federal agencies to provide certain essential assistance for hazard mitigation for electrical utilities and for other purposes. Yes, I like that. H.R. 165. To direct the Secretary of Interior to complete all actions necessary for certain land to be held in restricted fee status by Oglaga Silix tribe. I apologize if I butchered the name of that. And the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe and other purposes. Yeah, no. Fair Lending Testament to, this is going to be H.R. 166. To establish an Office of Fair Lending Testing to test for compliance with Equal Credit Opportunity Act, to strengthen the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, to ensure that persons injured by discriminatory practices, including organizations that have diverted resources to address discrimination and whose mission has been frustrated by illegal acts, can seek relief under such act, and to provide for criminal penalties for violating such act and for others. Yes. H.R. 167. To amend the Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act of 1977 to authorize partnerships between states and non-government entities for the purpose of reclaiming and restoring land and water resources adversely affected by coal mining activities before August 3rd, 1977, and for other purposes. Yes, I agree with that. H.R. 168. To improve the ability of the Secretary of Agriculture and the Secretary of Interior to carry out forest management activities that would reduce the risk of catastrophic wildfires and other purposes. Yes, I agree with that completely. H.R. 169. To amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to allow for a credit against tax for sales at retail of safe firearm storage devices. No. I would definitely vote no on that. Here's the thing. If you want to buy a gun, the taxpayer shouldn't pay for it. So why would storing your gun be any different? H.R. 170. To amend Title 39 United States Code to enhance the administrative subpoena authority of the United States Postal Service and for other purposes. Yes, do that. H.R. 171. To require the Inspector General of the Department of Transportation to conduct an audit on the use of federal funds by certain entities providing public transportation and for other purposes. H.R. 172. To prohibit federal funds from any state, local, tribal, or private entity that operates or controls an injection center in violation of Section 416 of Controlled Substance Act, 21 U.S.C. 856, commonly referred to as the Crack House Statute. I disagree with this. This just furthers the war on drugs, and I think the war on drugs needs to be ended because it only does more harm. H.R. 173. To amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to classify certain automatic fire sprinkler systems retrofits as 15-year property for purposes of depreciation. I agree with that. H.R. 174. To amend the Immigration and Nationality Act to provide that aliens who have been convicted of or who have committed Social Security fraud are inadmissible and deportable. Yeah. Obviously, fraud is against the law. If they break the law, deport them. Very simple. H.R. 175. To amend the Immigration and Nationality Act with respects to aliens associated with criminal gangs and for other purposes. Yes, if you're out there breaking the law or helping others break the law, you need to go. H.R. 176. To amend the Immigration and Nationality Act with respect to aliens who carried out, participated in, planned, financed, supported, or otherwise facilitated the attacks against Israel. Yeah, that's fine. H.R. 177. To amend the Act of December 1913, 38 Statute 242 to extend access to the H.Con.R Reservoir and Lake Eleanor Basin areas for recreational purposes and for other purposes. Yes, that's fine. Go ahead and do that. H.R. 178. To require Secretary of Agriculture to carry out activities to suppress wildfires and other purposes. Yes. H.R. 179. To direct the Secretary concerned to consolidate with impacted parties when conducting a forest management activity. Yes. H.R. 180. To amend the Endangered Species Act of 1973 to require publication on the internet of the basis for determinations that species are endangered species or threatened species and for other purposes. Yes. H.R. 181. To amend the Endangered Species Act of 1973 to provide that artificially propagated animals shall be treated the same under the Act as naturally propagated animals and for other purposes. No. H.R. 182. To ensure that payment of interest and principal of debt of the United States. Yes. Pay the debt that America owes. That simple. H.R. 183. To amend the Federal Lands Recreation Enactment Act to provide for a lifetime national recreational pass for law enforcement officers. Sure. Let law enforcement officers go to recreational parks and stuff for free. That's fine. I have no issue with that. H.R. 184. To require that only two alternatives be considered with respect to certain proposed collaborative forest management activities and other purposes. Sure. Make shit simple. H.R. 185. All it says is to advance responsible policies. I want to know how they would do that because there is no text document available yet for this. So we will hold off and hopefully circle back on 185. H.R. 186. To authorize the National Medal of Honor Museum Foundation to establish a commemorative work on a national mall to honor the expeditionary acts of valor, selflessness, service, and sacrifice displayed by the Medal of Honor recipients. Yes, sure. H.R. 187. To provide for the standardization, consolidation, and publication of data relating to public outdoor recreational use of federal waterways among federal land and water management agencies. Yeah, that's fine. H.R. 188. To require that the Amtrak Board of Directors comply with the open meetings requirements of Section 552B of Title V United States Code and other purposes. Yes. H.R. 189. To amend Title 40 United States Code to eliminate the leasing authority of the Securities and Exchange Commission and for other purposes. No. H.R. 190. To provide for expedited removal of certain illegal aliens. I want to know which certain illegal aliens before I answer that. Probably a yes, but at this time, there is still no text document available. So until I get a text document, I can't speak firmly on that, but it would probably be a yes. H.R. 191 to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. Tell me that you just hate Biden without telling me you hate Biden. Clearly voting no on that. H.R. 192 to amend Title 49 United States Code to require Amtrak to include information on base pay and bonus comprehension of certain Amtrak executives for other purposes. I feel like we don't require other companies to do that, so why would we require that of them? So no. H.R. 193 to direct the Secretary of Health and Human Services to issue guidance on payment under the Medicare program for certain items involving artificial intelligence. Sure. H.R. 194 to amend Chapter 211 of the United States of Title 18 United States Code to modify venue of certain offenses. No, I don't think the venue of certain offenses needs to be changed. Just so you're aware, venue used here is talking essentially about who has jurisdiction, whether it is county, state, federal. Just kind of depends on what court you would end up going to. H.R. 195 to redirect the Secretary of Homeland Security to relocate to the state of Texas, the headquarters of U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and for other purposes. No. H.R. 196 to rescind certain balances made available to the Internal Revenue Service. No. H.R. 197 to provide for a land exchange in the Chippewa National Forest, Minnesota, and for other purposes. I need to know more. So H.R. 197, probably need to look into that more once the text document's available. H.R. 198, to authorize grants for states and units of local government that take efforts to stop enabling repeat violence and for other purposes. Yes. H.R. 199, to provide for across-the-board recessions of non-secretary discriminatory spending and for other purposes. Non-security discretionary spending. God damn, I am getting tongue-tied today. I apologize, guys. But yeah, past that. Spend less money, sure. H.R. 200, to impose restrictions on federal agencies with respect to appointments and for other purposes. No. H.R. 201, to implement a 5-year pilot program establishing a performance-based pay structure for certain federal employees in order to enhance productivity, accountability, and employee satisfaction in public service. Yeah, do that. H.R. 202, to establish a commission to study the relocation of certain agencies outside of the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area and for other purposes. Feel like that's extra money we don't need to be spending. So no. H.R. 203, to withhold federal highway funds from states that provide driver's license or identification cards to aliens who are unlawfully present in the United States and for other purposes. Tell me you hate California and New York without telling me. No, because those are federal dollars going to fix the highways that citizens still drive on. H.R. 204, to require that the Secretary of Agriculture and the Secretary of Interior submit accurate reports regarding hazardous fuels reduction activities. Yes. 205, prohibit the use of federal funds for congressional earmarks targeted to a state or units of local government that is a sanctuary jurisdiction. No. Just no. H.R. 206, to amend the Fair Housing Act to prohibit discrimination based on the use of Section 8 vouchers and for other purposes. Yes. H.R. 207, to direct the Secretary of Commerce to establish a task force regarding shark depredation and for other purposes. Yeah. H.R. 208. To provide that the salaries of members of the House of Congress will be held in escrow if that House has not agreed to a concurrent resolution on the budget for the next fiscal year by April 15th. I would say yes, but H.R. 209, to hold the salaries of members of a House of Congress in escrow if the House of Congress does not pass regular appropriation bills on a timely basis during a Congress. Yeah, I'm fine with that one. All right, so that concludes House resolutions. We got a couple more sections to get to here. So we have the Congress resolutions. Everything that was passed or introduced was purely administrative and doesn't really have any bearing on anything. Then we have House concurring resolutions. So regarding consent to the assembly outside the seat of government is one of them. And that is pretty much just saying that people can be called back. Purely administrative. And the other one is establishing the joint ad hoc committee on trade responsibilities to develop a plan under which the functions and responsibilities of the Office of the United States Trade Representative shall be moved to the legislative branch in accordance with Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution of the United States of America and for other purposes. I am fine with that. Go ahead and revert back to some original constitutional text. That works. And then, all we have left is Congress resolutions, which are as follows: a concurrent resolution extending the life of the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies. Sure, that's fine. A concurrent resolution to provide for the counting on January 6, 2025 of electoral votes of the President and the Vice President of the United States. Purely administrative. The last one, a concurrent resolution authorizing the use of the rotunda of the Capitol for the laying in state of the remains of the late James Earl Carter Jr., 39th President of the United States. I am glad that passed. Yeah. And I believe that does conclude the actual business portion of the podcast. I'm just going to leave off with a couple notes here. One, I apologize that the quality of the recording is not as great as the future recordings will be. I had to record this one on my phone as I had some personal matters come up that would otherwise have prevented me from getting this podcast out on time. And I would like to just thank all of you for coming and listening to me. And I want to remind you, every bit of money made from this podcast or from clips of this podcast will be used so I can eventually run for office, whether that be House, Senate, or President. Really should have said and or there, but semantics. Y'all have a great day. Enjoy your life. And my next episode should be out next Sunday. Thank you.